And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. And on this podcast, continue to talk about the concept of elasticity in terms of doing calculations. And then we talked about elasticity in terms of looking at the overall elasticity of the graph, the overall elasticity of the curve. And so we now want to look at some extreme examples of this. So this one over here on the left is a demand curve for some good, where the demand curve is at such an extreme position that it is perfectly up and down. It is perfectly up and perfectly straight, completely steep. And so what that means is, that means that if the price of the good goes up, this consumer will continue to buy just as much of the good as they did before. So when the price was P1, they bought Q1 units of the good. Price goes up to P2, and they still buy Q1 units of the good. Example of this might be somebody who is maybe addicted to a drug, and the price goes up, and they have to have it because they're addicted. It might be insulin if somebody has diabetes, and the price goes up, and they don't care. They need the insulin, so they're going to keep buying just as much as they did before. This is a very extreme condition where when the price goes up, they keep buying the same amount as they did before. Let's use some terms to describe this. First of all, we would say that this curve, this perfectly steep curve, is what we call perfectly inelastic. That's a perfectly inelastic demand curve. It is perfectly inelastic. And what that means is that this person is completely and totally, they are completely and totally, that's supposed to say completely there, sorry, they are completely insensitive. They are completely insensitive to price. They are completely insensitive to price. So they're just completely insensitive. You raise the good, and they just keep buying the same amount as they did before. And so the reason why this would be true is because this person considers there to be no substitutes for the good. There's no substitutes. They have to have it. And so in some way you might think about this as I'm not sure if this is quite right, but you might think about this as the concept of love. It's something that you love, that you have to have. There's no substitutes for it, and you're completely insensitive to price. No matter what the price does, you've got to have, this many. That is perfectly inelastic. That's a perfectly inelastic demand curve. And then on the other extreme would be this curve over here, which is completely flat. And on a curve that is completely flat, so what that means is that if you raise the price even 1 penny, let's say this would be P2 right there. If you raise the price even 1 penny, the quantity they consume will go from Q1 all the way down to 0. They will buy none.